Welcome to the Global Leadership Podcast, where leaders of all sorts come to grow and expand their influence in a healthy and holistic way. We know here at the Global Leadership Podcast, when a leader gets better, everyone wins. I'm here with my good friend and co-producer, Aubrey Wentz. And Aubrey, I believe we have some special guests with us today. Is that correct?
That's right, Eric, and I am really excited to introduce them to our community.
I am too, but first of all, it's a bit of a unique day for the Global Leadership Podcast. First of all, we're wrapping up season 7. We're gearing up not only for season 8 with some exciting changes, but also gearing up for the Global Leadership Summit.
Yes, I'm pumped for the summit. We had meetings this last week talking through what faculty are going to be in the podcast studio with us. I'm so excited to capture these conversations and bring this great actionable leadership content to our community.
Right. Before we get to that and the summit and everything, why don't you fill everybody in on what's happening at the Global Leadership Podcast?
Yeah, I have loved the last year and a half of getting to be a part of putting the podcast together as a producer. And it's just gotten to the point, the podcast has grown to the point where my skill set is not the best fit for what the podcast needs to move into this next season. And so I am going after the summit. This is kind of my final podcast. I'm going to be transitioning out of my contract role with the Global Leadership Network, but have loved my time here and am excited when a transition is because something's growing and it needs something new and different.
Yeah, lots of mixed emotions here. For those of you listening who don't know, Aubrey joined the Global Leadership Podcast in 2023, and she has brought so much stability, so much excellence to our work. Personally, a lot of laughter as well. And personally, I know that I cannot thank you enough. It's been an absolute blessing and privilege to work alongside you during this last season. Can't wait to see what life has for you going forward. While I'm on the topic of transitions, you may hear from me from time to time, but I'm also going to be moving into a role that's a little bit more behind the scenes. So, Aubrey, why don't you now introduce these folks that are with us today?
Well, we'd like to go ahead and introduce our very special guest for today's episode. Joining us today is our very own David Ashcraft. He's the president and CEO of the Global Leadership Network, and Whitney Putnam, who is the VP of Marketing and Communications. Hi, David and Whitney.
Hello, Aubrey. Hello, Eric. Good to be with you guys today.
It's so good. Thanks for having us, you guys.
So glad to have you. We are really excited to announce that today, with season 8 of the podcast, you are going to get to hear a lot more from David and Whitney. David's going to be the lead interviewer of our podcast, along with some other amazing leaders, including Craig Groeschel and the GLN's very own Lori Herman and Jason Jaggard. And then additionally, Whitney is going to be our host for the podcast now. So, David and Whitney, I would love for each of you to share, so we can get to know you a bit, how long you've been here with the GLN and a little bit about what your role with the GLN is.
Okay. Well, I, Aubrey, have been at the GLN less than a year, which is wild. But the GLN is not new to me. It's been very formational in my journey as a leader. I can recall times in Kansas City where I was going to a summit where I was a pastor's wife, and then I transitioned into different versions of my career that God has had for me. And so I'm not new to the GLN. I'm certainly new to the GLN staff. And so it's been a real joy for me. Aubrey, one of the things that I have loved the most as serving in the marketing department is my team. They're stellar and incredible and experts in their fields that I am not experts in. And so I learn new things every single day from them, and I absolutely love that. And the other part that I really love about my role at the GLN is obviously in marketing. It's our job to make sure that the global leadership reaches to the ends of the earth. We want everybody to hear about it because we believe that everybody has influence. And so what a cool thing to get to wake up every day and say, hey, how are we going to do this together, team? How are we going to go through social, through email, do people still send mailer pigeons? I don't know. If they did, we would do that so that people would know that they have influence. And so it's a pretty cool job that I get to do with pretty cool people that I'm really enjoying.
Fantastic.
Aubrey and Eric, can I just pause for a moment and say thank you? Well done for the last 18 months. 30 different episodes, about 340,000 downloads of those episodes of podcasts in the past. And so, way to go. You guys have done a fantastic job in ramping up what's going on with the GLM podcast, and I appreciate both of you very much.
We are so grateful for what you guys have done. I think about the thousands of leaders that you've impacted because of how you've come alongside them through the airways, through the GLM podcast. So thank you so, so much. And David, if it's okay with you, I think some people want some behind the scenes of who you are. How does that sound? Can we ask you a few questions?
You may. Definitely. Go ahead.
Okay, sounds great. So a couple of questions, and I've had the joy of getting to know David just in and around the office and here and there. David, how long have you been at the GLN now?
So I have been officially in this role just about 13 months, I think we're coming up on. So still very new in the role, in this capacity anyway.
Absolutely, but you're not new to the GLN, correct?
No, correct.
Just tell us a little bit about just how you've been around the GLN for some years.
Yeah, so Whitney, before stepping into this role, I served as a pastor for 32 years at a church called LCBC Church. And LCBC just stands for Lives Changed by Christ. And we just said that's who we are. We're a community of people whose lives have been and continue to be changed by Jesus Christ. And when I stepped into the role of senior pastor at LCBC, it's funny that I was called senior pastor. I was the only pastor. I was the only staff person. And we were a church of about 150 people. And this was 1991. And in 1991, as I tried to kind of vision that group of 150 people of what could happen in the future, we actually started coming out to Willow. And I would bring a group of 20, 25 people each year to Willow for at least 5 or 6 years, just to kind of catch a sense of what, not that we ever dreamed that we would be the size of Willow, but just wanted them to see something different, something bigger than what they were accustomed to. Our church is actually located in Pennsylvania, South Central Pennsylvania, a community of about 4,000 people. So as we stepped onto the Willow campus, at that time, the church was running 10, 12,000 people, and we were just all blown away. And again, one of the best ways that I found to vision our people of something bigger, something different than what they'd experienced, and really just kind of wanted to blow the borders off of what they typically saw. And we came away with a passion for excellence. We came away with a passion for service, and really more than anything, a passion for lost people. And so every time, Whitney, we would come home, and on one hand would be incredibly inspired, on the other we would be totally depressed, and we would think we can never be like Willow is. And we thought, if we had their money, we had their people, then we could do all those same kind of things. So it was an interesting time, but that was my first exposure actually to Willow Creek and the leadership at Willow.
That is so fascinating. So if I'm doing the math right, which math is not my forte, David, but if I'm doing the math right, then Willow at the time was 3 times the size of Lancaster, Pennsylvania when you first were going. And so that was probably just a wild experience. And when you said that, David, I feel like so many leaders can resonate with something even like the Global Leadership Summit of, wow, this is incredible and I'm so pumped up. And like you said, maybe I'm even a little bit discouraged. Are we ever going to get there? And you've told a story, David, that I've been in conversations with, that you even had discouragement where even was it a professor who maybe even said to you, hey, your church doesn't, tell that story just briefly. Just tell that story just briefly.
Yeah, 5 or 6 years later, I was working on a Doctor of Ministries degree at Trinity. I probably shouldn't say the name, but Trinity Seminary there in Chicago. And I was in a class on how to grow your church beyond 600 people. And at that time, we had grown to about 400 people. And so for the project, we had to write out a plan and then present our plan to the entire class as to how we were going to grow beyond 600 people. And then the professor in front of the class would actually evaluate whether or not he thought you were going to be successful with that. And so I presented my plan and felt real good about it. He went into his evaluation, and bottom line, he just said, you know what, it's never going to happen. LCBC will never grow beyond 600 people. And I don't know that he voted us the least likely to succeed in the class, but in essence, that's what he said. So we weren't given a lot of encouragement in that environment anyway.
That is wild. If there was a yearbook page, you know how you used to have the yearbook pages of least likely?
That would have been us. Yeah, it would have my picture on that one. So
that would have been you. And one thing, David, that I really admire in you as a leader that I've just seen firsthand is you are certainly, God has gifted you to be on the stage and to teach and to lead that way. And you also are incredibly gifted, and many of us see you behind the scenes, leading from behind the scenes as well. How did you come to that view of leadership, David? Is there a story behind that, or how did you come to that place?
Whitney, that's a good question. I guess maybe some of it's personality. I am definitely an introvert, and so I do not seek naturally the spotlight. If I'm in a room and there's full of other leaders and things are going well, I am very, very content just sitting back. And even growing up, whether it was roller skating and it came time for couples skate, and I'm in 7th or 8th grade, I was the guy that was hiding on the wall or in the snack bar, afraid that somebody might even ask me, not that they even were, but afraid somebody might ask me to skate with them. And so that's just been my personality all along, is I don't really necessarily need to be in the spotlight. And so LCBC has been a great place to minister and lead, and 32 years there, surrounded by great leaders. One of my, so I'll just tell you real quick, our motto informally was, let's not do anything stupid to mess up what God wants to do here in our church. And so we just tried to stay out of God's way. And doing something stupid might mean relational issues or pride issues, some things that get in our way, or even just moral trip-ups and things like that. And so we just work to say, let's let God do his thing, and we're along for this amazing ride. And so over the 32 years, LCBC did grow finally beyond that 600 people. When I stepped out a year and a half ago, we averaged about 22,000 people each weekend across 19 locations. And Whitney, the fun thing is, the church has continued to grow and excel even in my absence. And so now probably averaging around 24,000 people a weekend, and have added 4 more campuses, so now at 23 locations. And so it's just fun to watch and know that I had opportunity to be a part of that, and that God allowed me to do that. But now that God continues to lead and help it bless it in the future.
I love that, David. And you are an incredible developer of leaders. Obviously, this is part of your track record. And so part of the podcast, one of our hearts and passions for the podcast is that this is a development of leaders, that people get to use this monthly, weekly. They just get to, like, whether you're in your car, or you're jogging, or you're walking, or you're doing laundry, whatever it is, that this is a tool that you get to develop leaders. So David, we have a really fun list of speakers coming up on season 8 that I know we're both really excited about. So we have Craig's coming on season 8. We have Marcus Buckingham. We have Amy Edmondson, some Summit favorites. We have Hort Schultze coming on. So that's just a little sneak peek of who's coming. Who are you? This is a really hard question, David, I think. Who are you most excited to hear from in season 8?
So, what's been fun, Whitney, in this role is having an opportunity to sit down with, via Zoom, each of the speakers that will be speaking at the upcoming summit. And I have loved doing that. And so typically there'll be 3 of us on that call. And so just to hear their passion for what they're doing, but also hear their enthusiasm for the summit and how excited they are to be even on the stage and speaking. And so with that said, I'm looking forward to, definitely Will Guidara is one that I'm excited about, as I first heard about him, maybe a year or 2 ago, and what he's doing. I'm very excited about that. I think that's going to be great. Arthur Brooks is one that I'm excited about. I think he's going to be a great interview and a great discussion, be able to have a great discussion with him. So I don't think there's a dud in this year's lineup at all, and I think everybody's going to be thrilled for who they're hearing and the opportunity to hear more in depth from each one of these speakers.
Totally agree.
How about yourself? Do you have somebody that you're most excited about?
So I've had friends already start asking me, who are you really excited to hear from? And similarly, I'm so excited to hear from Will. David, it's on my bucket list to go to the restaurant that he served at and grew to become the #1 restaurant in the world.
Pretty amazing.
So,
yeah.
I have that on my docket for Michael and I to hopefully get out there someday. I want to hear how he did that. And I am also so equally excited to hear from Amy Edmondson. I'm so curious about failing well. I know failure well. I have been around the corner just enough to know, yep, I've certainly come up short. So I'm really excited to hear from her on that. And you know what? I am super, super pumped to hear from Marcus. I have just been such a fan over the years. In fact, honestly, he's a household name here. Like, we talk so much about our strengths. I'm raising 3 little girls, and we try to pick out each other's strengths and encourage one another. So getting to hear from Marcus is going to be a real treat. So I'm excited about that. Now, a lot of those speakers are this year's summit, obviously. And David, you've taken teams, and we love when people bring teams to the summit. So what words of encouragement do you have if there are listeners right now bringing a team? How, or maybe they're not, but how would you encourage them to start prepping? Summit is so soon, right around the corner. How would you encourage them to start prepping for the summit?
When, my experience with the summit specifically, I started attending by myself, or Ruth, my wife, and I would attend 30 years ago. Then we definitely started bringing teams because, we all know that if we come by ourselves, then we go back to our team, and our team just kind of rolls their eyes at us. They glaze over and think, okay, we'll just wait to whatever they took away from that particular conference, wait till that wears off, and then we'll go back to normal. And so I didn't want that to happen, and so it was always a strong commitment for me to always bring Ruth along to whatever situation I'm in. Otherwise, she wouldn't even be excited to hear about the things that I'm talking about when I would get home. But then more importantly as well was bringing teams. And so we would bring, again, 10, 15, 20 people from our church. And then we started hosting the summit about 20 years ago. And in hosting the summit, what a great gift that was, because now we'll typically have, I think this year we have about 2,400 people signed up for the summit from our church. And what that allows then from the leadership standpoint is I can make a comment, or I can repeat a phrase, or an idea that I gleaned from the summit, and all of our leadership knows exactly what that phrase is. They go back to the moment when they heard it, and it just seems to accelerate the whole process. So I think teams is huge, and a great way to move forward the organization that you're working in by coming as teams. And then I think for personal preparation, the biggest thing I would say is just removing obstacles or distractions. And I know that we're all coming to the summit with a lot of things on our minds, and lots of things that it could easily distract us from really fully engaging. But I would say shut the cell phone off, shut things out of our mind that we're going through, and just kind of really open up our minds and hearts and say, okay, let's just listen here. Because typically in every summit there have been numerous nuggets that I'll take away, but sometimes just one or two that are almost game-changing for me as a leader, game-changing for our organization. Sometimes it's the smallest things, Whitney. It's not always the big principle or the big kind of dramatic thing that's happening in the summit. It'll just be one small thing that I hear and I go, that's it. That's the piece that I was missing, looking for, and now it really begins to move us forward. So I think removing distractions, just staying focused for the entire 2 days, and just listening for those nuggets to pop out.
Okay, that's so good. And equally as hard to shut off device. You're talking, leaders that feel like there's so much to do to shut down devices and say, I'm all in, but there's such beauty in presence. And so whether it's, you are bringing a team, or whether, listen, we understand if you can't this year. You can't bring your team. There's always next year. But even if it's this year, putting away the phones, really, really being present. And one thing too that's really important to note too about the summit, because we recognize leaders have a ton going on all the time. So one of the gifts that we want to give to any ticket holders is you get 7-day access. So let's say that those 2 dates at this point, you're hearing this podcast today and you're like, I can't. I have my family vacation. We're going to Montana, or whatever it is. You just literally can't make it happen. There are still ways that you can become the best leader that God's calling you to be, even now, even with a week's notice. So I love that, David. And one little fun thing, David, I love fun things. Did you know that I love fun things?
I do. Somehow that doesn't come as a surprise to me, Whitney. Yes, I assume you do. That's good.
David, I love fun things, and I think you're going to love this too, but you can't win this prize, David. I'm sorry.
Man.
I'm so sorry. You can take a picture of it, maybe hang it on
Exactly.
your wall.
I can hand it to the person that wins it, maybe. So
Oh, yes, David, that's what we're going to do. We're going to do that.
good.
Okay, so a really fun thing, because Summit is just around the corner. It is just a week away, August 8th and 9th. And so for anybody that actually registers for your ticket upon hearing this podcast up until the Summit and uses the code podcast10, you have to use the code, which actually is going to give you a discount to the summit. So that's a perk. But using that code, you are going to be entered into a giveaway to receive a Coach K signed basketball that David can present to you. Either online, we'll figure out a way, or if it can be in person, we'll figure out that too. So that's a really fun giveaway. Coach K is going to be on the summit stage. And so maybe you're already envisioning a nice place on your shelf that you would like to see the signed Coach Coach K basketball. Again, if you sign up with the code podcast10, which is only for our podcast community members, you will be dropped in a lottery to get that basketball. And obviously you're going to have to sign up before August 8th in order to receive that giveaway. Does that sound good? David, you like that?
Amazing. Yeah, I think that's a great gift. That I'm sorry that I can't win it. I assume that knocks you out of the running as well.
Me too. My husband is going to be really, really sad, actually. He would really
love that.
that.
Families as well, then everybody's out.
I know, it'd kind of be a legacy piece. It's kind of a legacy piece, like, hey, look at Coach K. I mean, that's something your grandkids actually kind of want,
Exactly.
That's good. Well, David, thanks so much. This was really, really fun. Thanks for joining me. I think we're going to have a good time together. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this, Whitney, spending time with you. Again, the guest that we talked about earlier, I think is going to be fantastic. One of the things we're going to be doing as we move forward is having a theme each month with our podcast, similar to what we're doing with our 365 products, where there's a theme each month. And so we're going to be able to drill down a little bit deeper into specific topics each month. And we'll keep the theme going in front of all of our leaders who are listening to the podcast. And actually, we'll have a third podcast each month as well that will be coming out to each one. And so excited about some of those minor changes and building off of what Eric and Aubrey and team have been building for the last 18 months. I think it's going to be excited to move forward, and I can't wait to see where this goes.
Yes, David, I can't wait to hear you interview all the incredible guests we have for season 8. So we're just going to wrap up, you guys. Again, you'll be hearing from David interviewing our great guests along with other interviewers. We're just really glad that you're a part of this leadership community. And so if you can, please like, rate, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. It actually really helps us out, and it helps us reach other leaders. We are really excited about what season 8 is going to bring us into our podcast community. And so until then, please remember that everyone has influence. So lead where you are.